Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take the subjects that just really get us excited, and we try to get you excited about them too. So I'm Ari.
And I'm Kimi, and we're ready to get into it today.
We are, and Kimi, we like to start with a little bit of humor just to kind of break the ice. So, why did the Aston Martin go to therapy?
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me.
Well, it had too many car ouslings about its identity crisis between a sports car and a grand tourer.
You got me there. I like that. It's quite fitting, actually, for what we're diving into today.
Exactly. And speaking of which, the subject of our deep dive today is a really quite interesting one, the Aston Martin Vanquish, specifically the second generation, which was produced from 2012 to 2018.
Yeah, this was a car that really aimed to kind of capture, that sweet spot between, the outright performance of a sports car
Yeah.
and the luxury and refinement of a proper grand tourer. And of course, Aston Martin, they offered it in both a coupe and a convertible version, which they call the Volante, as is their tradition.
Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's that balancing act between sportiness and grand touring comfort that we really want to explore today. What were the design choices, the technical features, the different variants, all of that went into creating this car and its kind of unique place in Aston Martin's history.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've done our homework, gathered a good amount of info on this car, so hopefully we can paint a pretty detailed picture for our listeners today.
All right, well, let's start at the beginning then with the design. I mean, this car, it's a looker. There's no doubt about that. And the man behind that design was Marek Reichman.
That's right. And it actually, the story kind of starts back in 2012 with a concept car called Project AM310, which, they debuted at the Concorso de Eleganza Vita d'Este in Italy. Which is, one of those super high-end, automotive events where the really exclusive stuff gets shown off. So, it's a clear sign that Aston Martin had something special in the works.
And it definitely got people talking. And then later that same year, the production version of the Vanquish made its own rounds, at Goodwood Festival of Speed, the London Film Museum, and Monterey Car Week. Really kind of a global tour to build up excitement.
Yeah, they really wanted to make a splash with this one. And speaking of the car itself,
Yeah.
It was actually based on Aston Martin's vertical horizontal platform, or the VH platform for short, the same platform that underpinned the DB9. So, it wasn't starting from a completely blank slate.
Right. They were building on something that had already proven itself. And in terms of construction, they went with aluminum extensively for the Vanquish, which, makes sense. It helps keep the weight down. And, Aston Martin has always been a fan of using lightweight materials.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting, they actually built the Vanquish at their facility in Gaydon, Warwickshire, which is the same place where they built the DD9, which was actually the very first production model to be built there. So, a little bit of historical significance to that location for Aston Martin.
That's cool. And so let's talk about what was under the hood, because, this is an Aston Martin after all. It needs to have some serious muscle.
Oh, absolutely. So the initial version, the one that launched in 2012, came with a pretty hefty 5.9-liter V12 engine, naturally aspirated, of course, which pumped out 565 horsepower and 457 pound-feet of torque.
Yeah, those are some serious numbers. And paired with a 6-speed ZF automatic transmission, which they call Touchtronic 2, got the car moving pretty briskly. I mean, 0 to 62 miles per hour in 4.1 seconds and a top speed of 183 miles per hour.
Yeah, that's pretty quick. But, Aston Martin, they're always looking to push things further. And in 2014, they actually introduced some pretty significant updates, including a new 8-speed ZF automatic transmission this time, which they called Touchtronic 3.
Okay, so more gears to play with.
Yeah, exactly. Smoother shifting, better performance. And along with that, they actually gave the V12 engine a little boost as well. So it was now up to 568 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque.
It's a bit more oomph all around.
Right. And, the performance figures reflected that. So 0 to 62 miles per hour came down to 3.6 seconds, and top speed went up to 201 miles per hour.
So yeah, that's a pretty noticeable difference. And it wasn't just the engine and transmission that got some love. The chassis also saw some improvements, right?
Yeah, definitely. They actually made the aluminum structure 30% stiffer while also making it lighter, which is, no small feat. And they really went all in on carbon fiber as well, using it for the body panels, the carbon fiber subframe, and a big extruded cross member, all of which helped to increase the torsional rigidity by a whopping 25%.
So basically, they made the car stiffer and more responsive, which, when you're pushing it to those speeds, it makes a big difference.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, this is a little less known fact, but the redesigned front end actually allowed them to mount the engine about 0.7 inches lower in the chassis compared to the DBS, which, might not sound like much, but it does have a positive impact on the car's center of gravity. So, all these little details add up.
They do. And of course, no discussion of a car like this would be complete without talking about the suspension and the brakes because, you need to be able to control all that power.
Oh, for sure. So the Vanquish, it had a double wishbone suspension setup, coil springs, anti-roll bars, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And for starting power, they went with ventilated carbon ceramic disc brakes,
Yeah.
which, those are pretty high-end, offer excellent fade resistance and performance.
Right. And to give the driver a bit more control over how the car handled, they also included a 3-stage adjustable adaptive damping system.
Yeah, so you had normal, sport, and track mode, so you could really kind of dial in the ride and handling to suit your mood or the road conditions.
Cool. And, those sticky Pirelli P0 tires probably help with grip as well. And I guess for those who are curious, they did release fuel consumption and CO2 emission figures as well, though, I doubt that's the top priority for most Vanquish buyers.
Probably not, no, but it's good information to have.
It is. It is. All right. So we've covered the basics. Now let's get into some of the more specialized versions of the Vanquish because, Aston Martin, they like to offer a little something for everyone.
Yeah, they do. And, starting with, I guess, the most obvious one, the Vanquish Volante, which is their name for the convertible.
Right. The one with the wind in your hair.
Exactly. And this one actually came out in 2013, and it featured a really nicely engineered triple-layer fabric roof that could fold away in just 14 seconds.
That's pretty quick. So you could, if you saw a break in the clouds, you could be top down in no time.
That's the idea, yeah. And, obviously the Volante was a little bit heavier than the Coupe because of the extra mechanisms for the roof and all that. But they did retune the suspension specifically for the Volante to make sure it handled properly.
Smart. And
Sure.
fun fact, unlike the Coupe, which you could get with either 2 seats or 4 seats, the Volante only came with 4 seats.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I guess they figured, if you're going to have the top down, might as well have the extra space for passengers.
Makes sense. And then, of course, for those who wanted a bit more, a bit more bite from their Vanquish, Aston Martin released the Vanquish S in 2016.
Yes. The S, always a sign of something a little more special.
Exactly. So this one had a power bump up to 595 horsepower. And they also tweaked the transmission to make the gear changes even faster and crisper.
Okay, so definitely a sportier feel then.
Oh, yeah. And visually, they gave it a new body kit with some, some exposed carbon fiber elements just to let everyone know it meant business, plus some nice diamond-turned alloy wheels and carbon bonnet louvres, just for that extra bit of aggression.
I like it. But, for me, I think the most exciting Vanquish models were the ones that came out of the collaboration with Zagato.
Ah, Zagato. Yeah, the Italian design house. They've done some incredible work over the years. And their versions of the Vanquish were definitely something special.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they actually did 4 different body styles, the Coupe, the Volante, a shooting brake, and then a super limited edition Speedster, of which they only made 28 examples.
Wow. That's pretty exclusive.
Yeah, and the Zagato designs, they were just so unique. The bigger grille, the prominent fixed rear spoiler, and those round taillights. It was just a whole different level of style.
And it's funny, Jeremy Clarkson, the famous car journalist, he said the Zagato Vanquish was utterly bewitchingly beautiful always. But then one of his colleagues said it looked like executive desk drawer dividers. So, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I guess.
It really is. And so I guess, wrapping things up, the Vanquish, it received a bit of a mixed reception when it came out. Some critics loved it. Some had their reservations.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of praise for the styling, especially the Zagato versions. And everyone seemed to agree that the V12 engine sounded fantastic. That classic Aston Martin growl.
Oh, yeah. That's a big part of the appeal for sure. But there were some criticisms, mainly about the rear seats, which were a bit cramped, and some people felt like the overall design was starting to look a bit dated, especially compared to the newer DB11.
Yeah, I can see that, and there were some nitpicks about the interior and technology as well, but overall, I think it was a successful car for Aston Martin. It really pushed their design and technology forward, and it offers something truly special for those who could afford it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's fair to say that the Vanquish in all its different forms really did embody that blend of performance and luxury that Aston Martin is known for. It wasn't just a sports car. It wasn't just a grand tour. It was something in between, something unique.
Exactly. And, it's interesting to think about where the Vanquish fits in the grand scheme of things, with all the changes happening in the automotive landscape, electrification, autonomous driving, all that stuff. Will there still be a place for cars like the Vanquish in the future? Cars that are built for, pure driving enjoyment and that sense of occasion?
That's a great question, and one that I don't think anyone really has a definitive answer to yet, but it's definitely something worth pondering. What does the future hold for cars like this? And what will define their enduring appeal in a world that's rapidly changing?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thought, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see how things unfold.
We will. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground on the Aston Martin Vanquish. So I want to thank you, Kimi, for sharing your insights. And of course, thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure, Hari.
And until next time, take care.